here in Birmingham, you're going up hills and cul-de-sacs. You're going down some roads that are being renovated, some that are, these old streets from where it was, 1920s in Birmingham. And it's just a different kind of market. And if you don't know it.
And thankfully, I would catch some people before they bought, and I could give them some good advice. Like, hey, listen, they would be like, what do you think about this house? I'm like, eh.
Yeah, so I would say Mountain Brook, Vestavia, like you said, Homewood. Homewood's getting up there. You can't even find a lot for less than $400,000 to build on.
So moving into C-class area, and the definition for C-class neighborhoods would be, in my opinion, working class neighborhoods.
Northeast Lake, there's people over there that have renovated houses, and I don't know how they've sold them, but they've sold a few, but it's still pretty rough. I mean, it's a low D class.
There's whole big areas that you would never want to invest in.
Yep.
Like you just should never invest in. So when people get in trouble, that's what I see they do. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and today I have my co-host with me, Adam Hobson. Adam, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Spencer.
Good to be back in the saddle.
It is, yep.
We took last week off, even though we still released a podcast because we've recorded so many. So here we are. We're back, and we were talking, like, what should we be talking about today? And I thought, when we started this podcast, it was a different named podcast, and we started it just over 5 years ago. So just imagine COVID. It was 2020, summer of 2020, and Matthew and I were like, hey, let's start two podcasts. We started one for property managers, and we wanted one for real estate investors, but we called it the Birmingham Real Estate Investor Podcast or something like that. Or maybe it was the Birmingham Investor. I don't know. But it was all just about Birmingham because we were only in a few markets at that time. And we talked a lot about Birmingham. We talked a lot about like where people should invest and where they shouldn't invest. And I thought it would be great after 5 years to come back and revisit that topic because we are based here locally. You're an investor in this area. This is the market that I know the best. And so while we have a national audience, I think Birmingham is really popular nationwide, honestly, because I've talked to real estate investors all over the country, and they all have their kind of pockets where they like, whether it's in the Midwest or the Southeast. And Birmingham happens to be one of the very popular places that people like to invest. And so now that I have you as the real expert, you can tell everybody where they should be investing.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we should just tell everybody to stay out of Birmingham since we have enough competition. We just tell them how bad it is.
Well, that's right. No, I want to manage more and more doors.
Yeah.
You're trying to find more deals, so you want people to stay out. I want people to come on in and buy as many as they can.
That's right. Well, before we get started, so I'll tell you, I get probably one call a week from an out-of-state investor that maybe they didn't choose the right property management company. Maybe they had an agent that was just trying to get a commission and they were selling them stuff. But regardless, I think we've talked about this one time, either on a podcast or maybe it was outside, off air, but about that house in Fairfield that it was like some ridiculous amount this guy had to have. And, he was never going to get that, but he was sold a bill of goods from somebody. But I get a call at least once a week and these are the hardest ones. I've never bought one like this. These are the hardest ones to buy because they have started the rehab. I mean, once a week. Hey, I've got a house. I don't live in town. It's gutted. I need to sell it. Well, they're wanting to sell it for $70,000, what they paid for it after they've already gutted it. A half-gutted house that's going to need permits or takeover permits. Those are the hardest ones, but all of these are out-of-state investors. So maybe when we go over all this stuff today, we can save some of these people some pain and time and effort and energy, because if you don't know the Birmingham market, I think Birmingham's weirder than a lot of places. And my wife doesn't care anything about real estate, but I'll talk to her about it, and just so she has to listen to me every now and then. But like in Arizona, I'm assuming they're like on a grid system.
It's a grid,
you can just go for miles one way. You can take a turn. You can come miles. You could just find houses out in the just a flat piece of land.
Very
it seems like for
cookie cutter
days.
type.
That's
place,
right.
Yeah.
Just tons of them here in Birmingham. You're going up hills and cul-de-sacs. You're going down some roads that are being renovated, some that are, these old streets from where it was, 1920s in Birmingham. And it's just a different kind of market. And if you don't know it, I tell people all the time, hey, this is street to street. and they don't really understand that.
Yeah.
That, hey, how can you have over on, Avenue G in Inslee is great, but when you go to Avenue, V over here, it's a war zone, So anyway, I'm sure we'll get into all that, but maybe doing this, we can prevent some of that stuff.
100%. I mean, this is the whole reason. One of the reasons that we wanted to do the podcast back in the day when it was just Birmingham is because I was having the same conversations with investors every single day. I was taking a lot of the calls into the company, and there were calls just like the ones you're getting. Hey, I got a half renovated house. I'm looking to sell it. Or they would call us and say, hey, I bought these 3 houses, but I can't find anybody to rent them. Or I'm like, well, those were horrible houses to buy. Or like I would, and thankfully, I would catch some people before they bought, and I could give them some good advice. Like, hey, listen, they would be like, what do you think about this house? I'm like, unless you have walked this street and you know exactly what you're buying, don't do it. Because to your point, Birmingham's very, very different than some of these other cities. And so this is all in an effort to, in my opinion, help people make better decisions, right?
Yeah.
So it's because it's not good for the city if you are an investor, you're listening to this, and you're out buying houses that stay in a state of disrepair or get halfway. It's not good for the city. It's not good for other investors. It's just not good. So having said that, why don't we zoom out? And one of the things I like to do is just talk about the class of neighborhoods that are in Birmingham, and we're not going to name all of them, but if you're listening and you want to take notes, then and you want to know what class of neighborhoods there are here, then let's start with A class. And so I would say, in my opinion, A class neighborhoods, these are going to be the top of the top. They're going to be the Mountain Brooks, the Vestavia, and then they're going to be, I guess, Homewood. What else would you say is A class?
I mean, Southside Birmingham, probably some of it, right?
Yeah, some of South Side, like
Forest Park.
Yeah,
maybe?
Forest Park, 100%. Yeah.
Yep. So that area down there, but yeah, your Mountain Brook. I don't know if Mountain Brook's still the most affluent zip code in Alabama. Is it? You think?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I know there's like a Fairhope. There's some Fairhopes and some other ones in Alabama, but Mountain Brook's on up there if it's not number one, the most affluent. And I don't know how many people have rentals there, but I'm assuming.
Not many,
yeah. And if it is, it's probably in here. They didn't buy it for that reason, I would
Correct,
think.
that's right.
Yeah, so I would say Mountain Brook, Vestavia, like you said, Homewood. Homewood's getting up there. You can't even find a lot for less than $400,000 to build on right now in Homewood. Hoover, would you say is okay? So those are the A class, I guess. Any other A class besides? We mentioned Forest Park on South Side. This is like the
again, if you wanted to, you could probably pick pieces of different parts of the city.
Yeah.
Like you could take parts of Hoover and say A class, right? Greystone.
Yep.
Places like Highland, Lake Highland.
Yeah,
all
Lakes
of that. Yeah, Highland Lakes. That's right. Yeah. So you could pick parts of it across, but generally speaking, those are the areas.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you move into B class. What would you consider B class areas? And when we think of B class, just to kind of give it a definition, I would say this is upper middle class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. I live in Helena. I would say it's probably B class.
Yep.
Alabaster, your Pelhams. These are, I would say, on average, $400,000 homes, maybe on average. Now
parts of Oak Mountain.
Yep. Now some, there's still multi-million-dollar houses in Helena, and they're in Alabaster, and then there's also $90,000 to $100,000 houses in some of these really, rougher outskirts areas.
That's right. Trustful would be another one.
Trustful,
like
yeah. What You think Irondale?
Irondale's like BC, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. So I think there's probably, but yeah, for the most part, I think these areas are your B class. Even some parts of Vestavia, I think, are still B class.
Yeah, that's right. So. And so moving into C class area, and the definition for C class neighborhoods would be, in my opinion, working class neighborhoods. And they're not upper middle class, they're middle class, working class, great neighborhoods. And these are actually when people are thinking about buy and hold strategies, this is where smart investors like to put their money. If they can find a deal, this is where they want to put their money.
Yeah.
So,
I always think of Centerpoint as being like the best C class, and I don't know.
And that's on the eastern part of the city.
Yeah, and Centerpoint, I mean, more than I do about Centerpoint from, I'm sure it was like heyday when you were wholesaling back there. You probably got I don't know how many houses in Center Point back then, especially after
Tons.
2008. But, there was a lawsuit with the city of Center Point, and a bunch of investors did like a class action because of their inspectors and all this other stuff. But there's still so many houses out there that are vacant right now in Center Point. But, yeah, that C-class area, I mean, I think from a cash flow standpoint, you can get fully renovated houses from, 100 to 120,000 and potentially get 1,500, 1,500 in rent, you'd say?
Yeah, 12 to 1,500 bucks.
Yeah.
So I would say like Center Point, and if you're out there on the eastern part of town, then I would also say Huffman, Roebuck, Huffman, Pinson, Clay Chalkville, great areas, fantastic areas. And then if you wanted to move for C-class up kind of northwest, would you say Hueytown, Pleasant Grove, Adamsville, Forestdale? Would you say those areas?
Yeah, I would say that's some of it definitely C, some of the neighborhoods, but bordering on D class on some,
that's right.
because you got some of the outlying country areas that are old, smaller houses, but I think there's some established neighborhoods. Yeah, that definitely that C class that probably built in the same time they were in Center Point.
And then what about this is typically historically been a really hot place that people talk about, and that is Eastlake. And they talk about that because it's so close to Avondale.
Yeah.
And Avondale had a boom probably 15 years ago when a friend of ours, Kobe Lake, built a brewery there called Avondale Brewery.
Yeah.
And then it attracted a ton of upscale retail restaurants and businesses, and the real estate went through the roof. Everybody kind of saw Eastlake would be the next place to transform, and parts of it did up towards Ruffner Mountain.
Yep.
Up further up the mountain, man, they were selling houses for $200,000 and $300,000, I guess. But then down in the flats, kind of in the valley, that's what I think about of Eastlake. I would still say some of that's like D class.
Oh yeah,
and then some of it is C class. It's just really strange right there. So.
Yeah. So and you got Southeast Lake and Northeast Lake, which is divided by what is that, Interstate 20?
Yes.
So you got Northeast Lake. There's like this. There's a big lake. It used to be, I think, more of a prominent area back in the 40s and 50s, maybe.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure.
But this whole East Lake area has just gone down from probably starting around the 70s or 80s or whatever. But anyway, people have been renovating houses over there for at least, 15 or 20 years I know of, maybe more than that, and there's still houses to be done. But like you said, up around Ruffner Mountain, you get to your 84th Street, 86th Street, all the higher numbers, versus you get down on First Avenue, Division Avenue. Those
Division
are like,
Avenue rough.
that's the rough ones, yeah.
That's
yeah.
the rough.
So, and that's on Southeast Lake. So then you get, Northeast Lake. There's people over there that have renovated houses, and I don't know how they've sold them, but they've sold a few, but it's still pretty rough. It's a low D class.
Yeah, low D class.
If not F, on some of them over there. Yeah.
Which is like, and this is all what we're talking about here just highlights the point. You have to be careful where you're buying.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that. Funny story, I grew up in Mountain Brook, and I didn't know really anything of like the rest of Birmingham. I kind of stayed in this little bubble over there and hung out there. I went to a little school, but I started dating a girl from church, and she lived in Huffman, and she went to Huffman. And so I remember going out on one of our very first dates, and I was like, I didn't really know where to take her. But we went out to dinner probably or something like that. And then I was like, I thought something nice to do would be, well, she had a lake kind of over there by her house.
Yeah.
Well, it was East Lake.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And so like at night, I'm like, hey, let's just go walk around the lake.
Yeah.
And she's like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, who cares? What's
Yeah.
the big deal? I didn't realize how close to death I was. Like,
Yeah.
like anything could have happened out there, but that's how naive I was back in high school. Of course, this was back in the 80s. So.
Yeah. Yeah. You basically could have just told her, hey, let's go to the inner city. Let's walk around.
That's what I was telling her.
Yeah.
That was our first date.
Yeah. But at least you get murdered by a lake.
Yeah.
That's
we didn't
nice.
get married, so I wonder why.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and then let's keep going with, let's talk about, are there any other C-class, would you say, in the western part of town?
So
a lot of that was just in the eastern part.
Yeah. So what would you? Obviously Bessemer is on the west side of town, but Bessemer has got some good neighbor. Bessemer's got some $220,000 neighborhoods,
and then it's got some dogs.
Oh yeah, and then it's got some rough shotgun houses.
Isn't it the most dangerous city in America?
Brighton was for a long time. So Brighton is like a suburb, right? It's right beside Bessemer, and I think it was like the number one murder capital in the world for a while.
Murders per capita.
Yeah, per capita. Yeah, so Brighton for sure held that title because I used to work in Bessemer right beside Brighton. It held that title for a while, but yeah, I think Bessemer used to be. But then you've got on the McCalla side of Bessemer, you've got some good established neighborhoods. So
right.
that's why Birmingham's so weird is because there's all these people see well, we can buy in Bessemer right here, and then they're looking at the comps that are, maybe there's a railroad track or a main highway that separates these two sections, and they're like, look, right across this road, they're selling for $220. Well, over here, they don't realize these are shotgun houses, and they're selling for $10,000. It's just not. It's very hard unless you're on the ground here, riding around, looking at the neighborhoods, because all of us could go right now and drive through Bessemer, and it's changing. As we're driving, we go one street. Oh, wow, this is great. The next street over, wow, we don't want to get out right here.
That's right.
So anyway, yeah, all that to say, I think Bessemer's got some good areas. I don't know what you would think. Like a West End Manor would probably be like a low C class. Like West End Manor is probably the best side of West End.
And there are pockets of midfield that I think they're still look really good. There's a lot of home ownership, pride of ownership, and I'm thinking, wow, this could be a C class little pocket.
Yeah. Well, even in Fairfield, there's, I don't know what that big neighborhood in Fairfield is that's like the nicer homes over there. Our friend Brian was telling me he buys for some guys, and they bought one over there for like $120,000 and then did some work to it. So anyway, like you said, there's always little pockets, but for the most part, I would say the West End is going to be your D class at least.
Okay, so let's talk about D class. So D class, and this is the challenge, is because a lot of investors that are coming from California or New York or wherever, when they're thinking about buying cash flowing properties, they are thinking, hey, I need to, the spreadsheet, it needs to make sense. And so when they put it all in a spreadsheet, what makes sense is buying in these D class areas.
Yeah.
And so what they do is, well, if these numbers work, if I buy it for 50 and I put 20 in it or 25 in it, I got 75 in it, and I can rent it for $950 or $1,000. All they're doing is just manipulating a spreadsheet to come to get an outcome that they want. And then the reality is, to do that, you have to really expose yourself to a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And so you're having to go into these really bad D class areas, which again in West End. So West End, you can have Inslee in West End, you can have West End, proper, whatever. It's very, very street to street. I'm telling you, it's crazy. But there's whole big areas that you would never want to invest in.
Yeah.
You just should never invest in. So when people get in trouble, that's what I see they do.
Yeah.
They come in and they go, well, we had some investors from out of state one time, and they bought in this area in the western part of town called Wylam. You and I were just talking about Wylam. And we were going out to show them the houses. They had never walked foot in Wylam, but they had bought all these houses. They bought like 4 or 5 houses in Wylam. And so we went and walked them through these houses, the complete disrepair. And they said their comments to us were, we're going to change this entire area. We're going to buy so many houses here in Wylam that we're going to turn this whole place around.
Yeah.
And my comments to them were, you're not actually going to change anything over here. I was like, I respectfully, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't buy in Wylam anymore. They tried it, and they saw how difficult it was, and they saw when houses went vacant, how they got vandalized, and how hard it was to find somebody who even wanted to live in Wylam.
Yep.
Because it's kind of like off on an island by itself, and it was just really, but this is what happens time and time and time again. Even today, this was happening 15, 20 years ago, and it's still happening today. People are coming and buying houses that they shouldn't be buying in Birmingham.
Yeah, you're right. Well, even these guys talking about changing Wylam. Even when your friend bought made the brewery downtown and created that was a risk, and maybe he had no idea that's what was going to happen. Maybe he just wanted to sell beer. I don't know, but
well, he was a real estate investor. This is an interesting thing.
Okay.
So he owned a home investor franchise.
Oh, okay.
Well, I actually sold him a couple of houses before as an investor before he bought a home investor franchise. Then he bought one and started buying a bunch of houses, and so when the market crashed, he had some cash, and he was like, hey, I can buy this depressed commercial property over here in Avondale, and I want to build something kind of cool. And so he built the brewery, and then he bought like a, I don't know, it wasn't a condo. It was like a commercial building across the street. He turned it into condos, and that's where he and his wife lived for a while. And like, I think it was just like his belief in that area got other people to believe in that area, and they started coming and investing. Now, there's still really bad parts of Avondale. Doesn't mean the whole thing changed, but the real estate around there started going through the roof.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was just kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't, that's close enough to downtown Birmingham that's possible versus like a Fairfield. You're not going to go over there. I mean, maybe somebody could and build a brewery and like build up that area, because I think the appeal to how close it was to downtown was the main
That's
thing.
right. Yeah, it was appeal to close to downtown. You're really close to an area that I would consider probably B class, which would be Crestwood.
Yep.
It's close enough to Crestwood, close enough to then Irondale and Mountain Brook. So it's kind of bleeding over. It's like right on the edge. And then everybody thought, and including me, well, Woodlawn's next.
Yeah.
And so I went and bought an apartment complex in Woodlawn and lost my shirt on that thing. But yeah. So
I mean, but they've sold $300,000 houses in some parts of Woodlawn.
I know, right?
New construction.
Yeah, and listen, I'm an experienced investor, and I still made the wrong call.
Yeah.
So what hope do you have, out of state person, like just looking at a map without coming to the city and trying to figure out what's real and what's not real?
Yeah, I totally would have been on board with you on Woodlawn too, because if you look at it, it's so close to Crestwood South, or maybe North. I don't know which one, but it's so close, and maybe eventually it will come back. But I think it's a long-term play, and a bunch of people have to be in on it.
Well, our apartment complex was right across the train tracks. You had Crestwood, and then train tracks, and then our apartment.
Yeah.
And we thought, hey, I literally can take a rock and throw and hit a $300,000 house.
Yeah.
This thing's coming back, and it didn't ever come back. Now it's back. Jacob and I were out there probably 6 months ago, and they bulldozed all the abandoned houses over there, bulldozed the apartments we used to own, and now there's like brand new houses in a development. And it's like, yeah, this looks great now. We just didn't hold on long enough, right?
But I mean, you'd have to weather a storm and lose money for.
Well, it
15 years.
was a bad storm because it was a great financial crisis.
Yeah,
and the banks
yeah,
were like,
so-
nah, we don't like this. We don't like any of this stuff.
Yeah, hindsight's always 20/20. It's easy to look back and say, "Oh, I should have done this."
Yeah,
but
that's right. That's right.
When you're in the middle of it, you're like, "Who knows what's going on?"
But people can learn from mistakes that others have made, and so that's what this podcast is about. So let's talk. So that's kind of the buy and hold idea. When you think of properties that you want to buy to do owner financing, do you look at it the same way? Like, do you look at the areas in the same way, or do you look at things completely different?
Completely different. And the reason I get some of the houses that I've gotten is because
You don't care or about
no, it's definitely not that. It's because it is okay. So let's take that one that we walked through and did the before and after video on in West End. That is a West End manor that it was on a in street. It was a corner lot. The houses around it, there were a couple of rough houses, but, there was no
They're pretty decent
cages around the HVAC.
Right.
This little area was a decent area of West End. But, from a flipping standpoint, you got to have some flipper with some big confidence, some big energy to go over there and want to flip in that part of town.
because to sell to a retail buyer is going to be very difficult.
That's right. Yeah. So trying to sell to a retail buyer, unless they grew up in that area, not a great retail market. Some people look at that and they're like, well, we can't really make it work as a rental. So I get a lot of houses that, people can't really make them work as a rental. They can't make them work as a flip. So they're just kind of in this weird limbo area. Now, eventually somebody will come in and buy it as a rental or whatever. But I try to pick, the best houses, the best streets in the worst areas, I guess. I'm never going to go to a war zone and buy a house, an F neighborhood, but if I can get these, D, C class neighborhoods on really good streets, that's kind of what, there's somebody that's willing to live there because it is close enough to a Homewood or to a downtown Birmingham, and they're not in a dangerous area,
Yeah,
for the most
that
part.
makes total sense. I mean, I was thinking about Brian took us to a couple of his houses. Maybe it was in Fairfield that he's done in like this little area of Fairfield.
Yeah.
He had just bought one, and we were walking through that house. We were shooting a video, but he said, I've done that one. I've done that one. And maybe you had done one in that same neighborhood. I don't know if that's true or not. I just can't remember, but I was like, wow, really kind of sketchy area,
Mm-hmm.
but decent little street that they were on. And I was like, now I can see why people don't mind coming and buying these.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, I mean, because most of the time, well, I would say probably 65% of the ones that I sell owner finance are people that are going to live there, right? So they want to live there, they want to make it their home. So I look at it from what can I sell this for on owner financing? You know, if I know I can sell the house for $95,000, I know I can pay $40,000 for it. So like versus an investor that says, well, you know, I've got to put a new roof on, I've got to do this, I've got to, you know, how much is it going to cash flow every month? I just know that if I can buy it for 40 and sell it for 95, I can make money on it. You know, I typically like to buy it for, you know, sell it for 3X. So if I buy it for 30, I like to sell it for 90, but I'll buy them for 40 or 50, sell them for 95 to 100, and the math still works out where I can cash flow, you know.
Have you ever thought about, because I know Scott Jelinek has kind of gotten this phrase, the slow flip.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what he talks about is selling to other investors.
Yeah.
Would it open up your ability to buy more if you were like, hey, you know what? I can sell to other investors. I can sell to out-of-state investors, and I'm going to buy this house in wherever, Eastlake, Inslee, whatever, and flip it to another real estate investor and let them do the rehab? Or do you think that's more risk than you're willing to take?
I mean, I've got several people that are repeat, like probably 4 or 5 different people have 2 or 3 houses with me that's what they do. So like
really?
they'll take,
okay.
yeah,
so
like
you're
they're
already kind of doing this.
Yeah, so they're like contractors, so they may, you know, because like they're paying. Let's take a house on, I think it's 501 60th Street in Fairfield over there. I bought it for I think $35,000. I sold it to the guy for like 85 or 90. So his payment is like $960 a month. And you know, looking at $960 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1 bath over in Fairfield, you know, you're like, well, that's really not going to cash flow if I get mortgage on it, if I get debt on it. But he's taking it and he fixed it up, and I think he was renting it either per room. He may have added another bedroom, so he's making like, you know, he's bringing in $1,500 a month. He's paying me like $960, $980 a month. He's still making a little bit of cash flow off of it, you know. So a lot of times they'll do that. They'll fix it up. They'll rent it per room, or they'll rent it, you know.
That's a good way to do it. I hadn't thought about that, renting it per room.
Well, and a lot of people too, if they have workers that, you know, let's say they own a restaurant or something and it's close to their restaurant, they can put their workers in there. Maybe they're not charging anything, but it's, you know, they're still getting that value from
Yeah,
from their
right.
workers
That's
and
right.
stuff, you know.
That's a great idea. I didn't know you had already done that.
Yeah.
So because I know that's something that people do. They probably don't have as big of margins as you do, right? So if they bought it for 35, maybe they just flip it for 55 or something like that, and then that investor fixes it up, repairs it, rehabs it. That is the great thing about this owner finance thing. It's like somebody's improving that property.
That's right.
So that even if you get it back, it's in better condition.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, there's some that I've had that I've taken back that are in a little bit worse condition.
Worse condition, really?
Yeah. I told you about the one that the lady gave back. She said it was haunted, right?
No, you didn't tell me that.
So in Tarrant, there was a house that I bought.
Which, by the way, if you're an investor, don't buy in Tarrant.
Probably
if you're an F and F area, do not go in there and buy a rental house in Tarrant, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Especially now with, I mean, inspectors, it's getting bad. But so there's some decent little pockets over in Tarrant, but I've bought some rough houses over there. But anyway, this one house this lady bought, let's say I paid $20 for it, sold it to her on owner financing. I got like $8,000 down. It was a livable house, but it needed updating and all that. So 2 weeks go by and the house was totally gutted. They were like, hey, we're going to gut everything out of this. We're going to put new drywall, new floor. I'm like, this is going to be great. Well, the lady called and she said, this was a Hispanic lady and her husband. And she said, hey, I've got to give this house back to you. I was like, what do you mean? I said, let's meet out there and look at it. Totally gutted. And I was like, well, this is a problem, you know, because now it's completely gutted and it's going to be hard to resell. She was like, I don't really care about getting the money back. I've just got to get out of this house. I was like, what are you saying? She was like,
she had given you money down, like 10 grand.
8,000 down. 8,000. Yeah, 8,000 down. So at this point, you know, I'm 12,000 into it. She said, yeah, I think this house is haunted. And I was trying to keep from laughing. And I was thinking, well, it is Tarrant. Somebody probably has died in this house. I wouldn't put it, you know, you might be right. I don't know. But she was like, I just feel like there's spirits in this house and I've got to give it back to you. And she was like, can I get any of my down payment back? I was like, I mean, I can give you back like $1,000, but I was like, it's totally gutted now. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to resell it or not.
Yeah, right. I'm going to have to spend money to get it back up to where somebody even wants to buy it.
Yeah, yeah. And I've had people before, because I posted a video about it on TikTok, I've had people say, well, once you resold it, why didn't you just give her all of her money back? I'm like, that's not how this deal works. I was like, I didn't know I could resell it. I'm taking a risk. She gutted the house, you know.
Hey, why don't you do that and see what you would do with it?
Yeah. Regions Bank, you're not going to go to them and say, hey, guess what? I messed up. This house is haunted. I need to give it back to you.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right. They're not going to give you a dime.
no, and you're not getting out of the loan.
You're not getting out of the loan.
Yeah,
That's
you're
right.
you're done unless you sell it. So anyway, so she said it was haunted. I actually ended up selling it for the same thing. I think I got like $3,000 down. The next time somebody went in there and they finished renovating and all that, so it worked out. But that's the only house I've ever had that somebody said they want to give it back because it's haunted. You know, and I mean, I believe it. There was like candles lit in there, like, you know, spiritual, like all the, you know, the candles you see like in these stores, and like she was like cleansing these spirits. She was like saging the house. I'm like, hey, you know, some spirits are just tough to get out, I guess. So maybe it's not the house for you.
Wow, like we wouldn't let them out of a lease if that were the case. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like if they signed a lease with us and rented a house that one of our owners had in Tarrant, we'd say, sorry, you signed the lease. You're going to live with these evil spirits for 12 months.
Yeah. Well, as much as we tell people up front, you know, hey, look, this is just like a bank. This is, you know, don't call us for, you know, this is your house unless you don't make the payments, you know. And now I said it's got to be improved, or it's got to be in at least the same condition. You've got to keep it in at least the same condition. Most time they'll do stuff to it, put a new roof, fix it up a little bit, whatever. But, you know, I've had people that say, hey, you know, 3 or 4 years later, I decided I can't do this. Maybe they put 15 or 20,000 down, and they're like, so, you know, can I give this back to you? I'm like, well, you know, if you do, just know you got to sign a release, and, you know, I can't give you any money back on it. Well, you can't give me my down payment back? That's not how this works. You know, like it's just.
And you're
not.
explaining this to them
up front. Several places.
You're being very, very clear.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, everything. This is like a 20-page agreement that I have, you know, so they know everything, but I guess at the time they just want the house. Maybe they're not reading. I mean, it takes like an hour to close because we go through everything, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say, yeah, that house was haunted, but I've had several people give it back. But some of these places we can kind of get because it doesn't fit in a flipper's box or a renter's, you know, buy and
that's
hold
right.
box.
Yeah, that's a great point. Doesn't fit for flippers because there's not really a strong retail market, and then especially local landlords just kind of stay away from certain areas.
Yeah,
and you can find pockets.
But from a cash flow standpoint, I mean, you know, we talked about this before we started, you know, today. You go to a class area and you're paying $250,000. Well, I'd say maybe, you know, B class area, you're paying $250,000, $300,000 for a house. You're not going to be able to get $3,000 a month in rent unless you're doing an Airbnb or something like that. So you're playing more for the appreciation aspect of it. You know, maybe you're a high income earner, you just want to park money somewhere, versus you're buying a $60,000 house that you can get potential $1,100 a month for, whatever it is. You're doing it for cash flow, but you're going to have more of the headaches. You know?
Yeah, you're going to have more of the headaches. You're going to get less appreciation. Like we talked about, you know, these houses don't tend to appreciate very much. You do get some rental appreciation, but yeah, if you're a you know, a doctor, attorney, engineer, whatever out there, and you have extra cash and you just want to park it, then stay away. Just go B class, straight B class. You know, buy a $300,000-$400,000 property and just sit there and park your cash. But it's the people who are looking to maybe replace their income as quickly as possible that get in trouble by buying in some areas they shouldn't be buying in, because they're thinking cash flow. How fast can I get up to 50 houses, 100 houses, or whatever? And unless you're living here, or in any market for that matter, like you could be wanting to do this in Jackson, Mississippi. Well, the crazy thing is we just decided last week that we were no longer going to manage properties in Jackson, Mississippi, like the proper area. We eliminated a whole group of zip codes because it's gotten so bad. Yeah, and we said we're only going to, you know, it's kind of the outskirts. And so you just have to be very, very careful. But anywhere you go, there's going to be risk. And anywhere you go, there's this, I think, temptation for investors to think, how can I make as much as possible with as little effort as possible? And when you buy in these D-class areas, C and D-class areas, there's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of risk involved.
Yeah. Well, we talked about before too. It's now whether or not these agents or other property managers or whatever, like I've heard you tell people kind of like you just talked about the people in Wylam that were buying houses. You told them, hey, this is not going to happen. You're not going to turn this area around by yourself. There's tons of agents that I see, and we talked about getting that call once a month where people are halfway rehab. They realize, wow, we messed up. We're fixing to lose money. We got to cut our losses, But I think some of these agents and some of the property managers, there's great ones everywhere, but there's also some that like, hey, we got to make a living. They may be selling them this idea of, hey, sure, you can buy in this area. You buy 30 houses in Wylam, you're going to turn it around. Everybody's going to want to invest there. Or they're selling a house that they've got on MLS and these people are not there and they're not telling them, hey, there's a burned out house right across the street that you can't see from the pictures,
I think I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit. I don't think property managers, even if you're a bad property manager, I don't think they're saying that because they have to live with that problem, right? So it's more of a hassle to them. Like if I went and said, oh, yeah, you should buy these 30 houses, that may be good for our brokerage department, but it's going to be a nightmare for us.
Yeah.
We as a company are going to spend more money trying to manage that relationship, manage the resident relationship, the owner relationship. It's going to cause, like our people are going to spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with this, and they're not going to be able to take care of better clients or other clients. And so I think, we always say you date your agent, but you marry your property manager. Like the only way that we actually do well in this business is if we have great houses and great residents.
Yeah.
And for any property manager to kind of push people towards some shady properties, it's going to end up really bad for them. And I would imagine, like, in the very beginning, if I were just starting from scratch, I would be willing to manage anything, right?
Yeah,
You would take anything, like, bring it all on. But in the end, that's not good business.
Well, y'all are professionals. Obviously, you've got, you're in several markets, but you probably know better than I do. How many are there of these? I'm an agent. I'm also a property manager. I also do this on the side. They've got 10 things they do, and they've got 20 to 40 houses that they manage, and like they're just trying to, maybe they put a 10% markup on materials and labor on every, so if they're always fixing something, they're going to be constantly stressed. But if they're an agent over there in that area, I just think there's a lot of these little property I wouldn't even call it a company. I'd call it individual property managers.
There 100% are agents who, especially when the market gets slower. Yeah, they're like, well, I need I got to make a living. I need some recurring revenue. Yeah. And so what if I just manage some of these properties? And they have the built-in clients because an owner can't sell their house. And they're like, well, I could manage it for you. I'm a licensed realtor. And they start managing the property. The problem is they don't know what in the world they're doing. Yeah. They don't know how to screen residents. They don't know how to manage processes. And you can kind of fake it, I think, for a small amount of houses. Yeah. But if you start growing that, then the fact that you don't know what you're doing really starts to surface, and you start making mistakes and missing things if you don't have processes and people in place. And honestly, that's not what they want to do because you get paid so very little. Yeah. They want the big check. They want the realtor, hey, I sold this house. I got to win. I got a pat on the back, and I'm out doing the next thing. Yeah. But as a matter of fact, I was just telling you about this person I just interviewed, Jen Rulins in central Pennsylvania, super small market. Her only competition, there aren't any other professional property managers. Her only competition are realtors who are doing it. And they screw up all the time. So she says, we get more leads than we can handle just from people saying, hey, I need a professional. Yeah. Because the realtors just keep screwing it up. So from that aspect, yes. You try to sell them a pretty crappy house, and then you have to manage it.
And I'm not targeting agents or small property managers. I'm just saying there's great ones out there. Fantastic. But there's also, and I'm talking about, wholesalers as well, or anybody that is an owner investor that is here and, he knows some out-of-state people. Maybe you're somebody that owns 5 or 10 houses over in the West End, and you're just trying to offload these houses and hey, somebody else is going to be their problem, Yeah. So, I get wholesalers all the time that get so frustrated with me because they're out of state. They're looking at all these comps and they're saying, okay, well, this right here sold, and just like you were talking about buying that apartment complex. Well, this apartment complex is going to be worth $900,000 because look at these $300,000 houses right beside it, and they get so mad when I break the numbers down. Now, they're like, okay, you're just not a real buyer, and they'll hang up. And I just will text them and say, look, I totally understand, but I'm just trying to help you out because you're not going to sell this, And like I told a guy 2 weeks ago, he said, he was like, man, nobody's buying houses for 40 cents on the dollar. I was like, I mean, I do it every month. I was like, around here, I was like, this is not like, looking for the 1% rule. People around here need to get a deal because of the headaches,
That's right.
Anyway.
I've seen these out-of-state wholesalers.
Yeah.
Because I get their emails, and I'm starting to see more and more, hey, price reduction.
Yeah.
Like, because nobody wants your crap.
Exactly.
Like, the people that are looking at these houses are local, and nobody wants your junk.
Yeah, and I'm on everybody's list. So, like, what I'll see is a house that, Joe over here's got for, $79,000. It's a $20,000 house at best. And then a month or two will go by, and then I see, okay, well, Jessica, now she's sitting at this house. Another wholesaler's got it, and now it's it's $50,000 instead of the $70,000, and it keeps going back. I was like, look, I've seen this house 3 times already this year.
And I know what I'm going to pay for it, and nobody's gotten to that price yet.
Yep.
And so it's going to take the owner of that property just being realistic and honest about what it's really worth.
Yep.
And it's hard to do, especially if you've been sold a house for a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or, I mean, a lot of people have reverse mortgages on them. They have all, they have to sell it for a certain amount in order just to break even. And those houses are just going to sit there. The bank's going to get them back or something.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. All right, Adam. Good Birmingham episode.
Yep.
People love Birmingham. People love buying. And listen, if you're an investor out there and you're looking to buy real estate in Birmingham, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. We've got investor-friendly agents here in the office that help people. But then there's also a lot of wholesalers out there that can find deals. But I would just, kind of my final word, as you can probably tell just by listening to this podcast, just be careful where you're buying, what you're buying. Don't believe every spreadsheet you see. There's so many lies and all of that. You need to either speak with somebody who knows the street, or you need to come down and walk the street yourself.
And I would say don't trust anybody that doesn't tell you anything negative about it. If all they're telling you is positive things, if just like when you told the guy, hey, you're not going to do this in Wylam, it's going to be a rougher area. If you don't have somebody that's being honest with you, if they're just telling you what you want to hear, I would definitely get a second opinion.
Wouldn't you want to know the truth, even if it's bad news? I would.
I definitely would, yeah. But I think some people, like you said, they want to get into it so bad, and they want to get that first deal, and then they're going to learn really fast. Yeah. But, if somebody's selling them a bill of goods, then, they need to find somebody else.
I was super optimistic when I was first starting out. And so I bit off probably more than I should have by buying 10 houses at once. And as rental houses, but I was local. And I could figure things out. A lot of people that are buying are not local, and it was my everyday job. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't sitting at a bank, working, doing this not even part time. So you just have to be very, very careful what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd say leave yourself an exit strategy in case if that doesn't work out, you still have enough room where you can sell it and maybe at least break even.
100%. That's right. All right, everybody. That's it for this episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor. We'll be back next week with a new episode.